And now, it's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law.
It's a family affair. It's a family affair.
Is that a TV show theme? A Sly Stone, okay. All right, welcome to the show. We are talking about family affairs, wills and estates, and we have in studio today from McQuarrie LLP, formerly McQuarrie Hunter, and we'll play a little game to see who says McQuarrie Hunter first after this, okay? So it's McQuarrie LLP. We have Alyssa Lockhart, partner at McQuarrie LLP, and Leah Donaldson, associate in the Wills and Estates Department, Division?
Department.
So welcome back to the show.
Thank
Did you listen to, what was the feedback in the office on your first show together? Because you guys were ahead.
It was good. Yeah, it was good feedback. We had a lot of fun.
Okay, good. Well, no pressure at McQuarrie LLP. Because they know there's a little lawyerly competition. Yes, around the lunchroom. All right, so wills and estates. This is something that everybody needs. They don't realize it, do they? That's really what we're getting at, is everybody needs this.
Right, exactly. At the end of the day,
literally,
our lives will come to an end. But no, everybody needs one. And we do have a statute in British Columbia that covers what happens if you don't have a will. So in 2014, the government introduced what we referred to as WESA, the Wills, Estates, Succession Act. Prior to that, we had multiple different estate planning, estate administration, and estate litigation acts.
So bringing that under one umbrella, did that help?
I think in some senses it did.
But that's not long ago. That's only 3 years now.
It's only 3 years. We don't have a lot of case law covering all of the areas that WESA changed. But I think that more than the umbrella helping, what helped was the modernization of the statutes. So sure, we have a statute. We know what will happen if you die without a will. But what will happen is not necessarily what you want to see happen. And that's where the need comes in.
Do you get some clients that say, I'm long gone. You can all fight it out amongst yourselves?
I do get clients that say that, actually. And we watch in Leah's side of the department as they do fight it out amongst themselves.
So let's explain the difference. Leah, you're a litigator?
Yes, so I practice in the litigation area of wills and estates. And so that's different from the planning in that if a person did not have estate planning in place, or perhaps they did, but it wasn't done properly, disputes can arise as a result of that. And so that's the area of law that I practice in.
So, yeah, all joking aside, some people are like, okay, I'm out of here. You guys figure it out. But most people don't want that because they've lived through this before. Pretty much every family has been touched by arguing inside the family about money. It all comes down to money typically at the end of the day, or items, right?
Items that we place a particular sentimental value on don't have to be worth very much financially, but the win, I was closer to mom, or this mattered to me more, that can be very important to some people.
And are you seeing the litigation ratchet up because of the values of homes, which are, for most people, still their most valuable asset, right?
I would say it is ratcheting up because of that. But there's always been estate litigation because, as Alyssa has said, it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about those sentimental items and the relationship between the parties.
Okay, just off topic. So how would a judge decide that this vase is going to go to Sally and not to Joe? Like, how do they decide that? How do you argue that?
Well, if there's no estate plan in place to direct which item goes to whomever, sometimes the judge is forced to put in place a system whereby people choose items. So you're literally going through a house where people get one pick and then it's to the next person and it sort of rotates like that. It's not ideal. I don't think anyone that sort of spent their lives building up possessions even, but also assets would want to see a judge deciding who gets what.
Now, Alyssa, you can explain the wills and the estate portion of it, because will is the document, right? But the estate planning part is integral, isn't it?
The estate planning department looks at wealth preservation. And so when we think about wealth preservation... But
you're not an accountant or a financial planner.
I always tell clients, I talk a lot about tax, but I don't give tax advice.
Right.
So off you go to your accountant. But When we talk about wealth preservation, what we're talking about is family enterprise. We're talking about investments that we've built up over our lives. We're talking about our homes and the natural value that we hold in that vehicle. We're talking about our bank accounts. So what are we trying to do? Well, that's the family enterprise, right?
Okay.
So we look at most of my practice really is with small to mid-sized family-owned businesses.
So what do you define as a small to mid-sized family business?
Certainly some very profitable businesses with a high revenue turnover can be one fellow in the basement of his home. But we usually will see clients who have 5 to 50 employees. 50 is a very large enterprise when you start thinking about it. So there's a huge spread there. But when we look at wealth preservation and the estate plan, I work collaboratively with accountants, with financial planners, with realtors. We really try to assess what's happening. And so my practice is divided between corporate practice and wealth preservation practice.
So the average family, 2 parents, 2 kids, and they can still utilize your services, though, because there's a succession of money and items that might be outside of the will. Is that what I'm getting? Is what I'm hearing?
No, you can move assets outside of your will if you want to move assets during life. You can move assets outside of your will if, for instance, you have a closed investment account, like an RRSP or a RIF. You can designate a beneficiary, so that would move outside of the will. We, in British Columbia, since the adoption of WESA in 2014, we've been able to utilize multiple wills. We can put corporate assets into a will that will not be probated and all other assets into a will that will be probated and will be subject to the probate process, the delays, not as bad as we used to have in previous years, and the costs associated with that. So sometimes wealth preservation is misunderstood. A lot of the corporate side, we're trying to transition the asset during our client's lifetime to minimize or elongate the taxes. So we're
it's
trying
a succession plan, really.
A succession plan, absolutely. Yeah. And we try to move the taxes along the spectrum so that we pay them in smaller chunks, or we're trying to do a roll that will not be tax triggering. But then when we look at the time of our death, we're deemed by virtue of statute to have resolved to sell all of our assets at fair market value on that date.
So this sounds complicated to me when you have businesses and individual assets, and you're both lawyers, and notaries can do some part of this, but this is much more complicated and outside of their realm of what they're really are practicing, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a place for everybody in the field. Notaries offer a valuable service to the very simple nuclear family, for instance. For me, when I look at what a simple will is and who it serves, it's not great for someone with minor children or who wishes to hold money for minor grandchildren, because we have to be able to draft a trust so that our executor, who becomes our trustee sometimes, will hold that asset during the period of minority. And so you have to be able to draft a trust clause. The other challenge I see with simple wills, and it's not notaries, it's simple wills can be drafted by a notary or even a wills kit or a download from the internet. Blended families. We need to appreciate that when we leave everything to a spouse, under WESA, our children are entitled to claim against our estate if we don't leave what is fair and just and adequate to them. But our stepchildren are not.
Well, we're going to get into a whole segment on blended families.
Exactly.
Now, Leah, when you have somebody with a simple will, does that trigger litigation more often, do you think?
The only people we see in the litigation department are when a simple will did not work. So it's not that they can't work sometimes, but it's when people that need more complex estate planning don't arrange for it. We do see a lot of people with, quote, simple wills that turn into large disputes. And that is definitely not the person who's, the intention is to make things simple for people. But sometimes, it takes a more complex estate plan to establish that. It's
interesting that you're both in this wills and estates division at McQuarrie LLP. you're there to make sure that Leah doesn't get work.
Yes.
Because you set it all up so that she doesn't have to go to
Right.
court, and you only benefit if the person has the will didn't do it properly. I'm not saying that you would.
No, I mean, we don't obviously handle files that are from the same firm, but yes, absolutely. We only
And what's the name of the firm again?
Yeah, McQuarrieHunterLLP.
Oh, good one. All right.
I didn't lose yet.
Your quarter didn't go in the quarter jar yet.
But yes, no, so we only see when things have sort of fallen apart. But that's a huge benefit to have the lawyers that are drafting the wills and designing estate plans down the hall, because I can go and sort of ask them, and we, bounce ideas off one another.
And so do you ever say to Leah, what have you seen with these?
Constantly. We have departmental meetings where we hash out files that are on the desks of an individual lawyer all the time. Other times I'll see something that the courts have said about a case that didn't involve our firm at all, and I'll take it down the hall to Leah and I'll say, what do you think about this? Was this something that we should be thinking about, and should we change how we're drafting? Did we anticipate it when we saw the legislation back in 2014?
So what areas of WESA have not been challenged yet in court that precedent hasn't been set? Are there huge chunks of it, do you think?
Oh yeah, I would definitely say, because each case still has specific facts. So one section could be interpreted by the court, but it's on a certain set of facts. So when a new case comes along, it'll be a completely different family, and those facts will then, that'll be used to interpret that piece of legislation.
So you're saying
again.
it could be decades before
Decades. It will be. It will be decades.
So get it right the first time.
Absolutely. Well, that's the goal. That's what careful planning does for us.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so we're just getting started. So the first segment is on why would somebody need will and estate lawyer from Macquarie LLP? Because if you don't get it right, you're just throwing the cat amongst the pigeons when you're gone, right?
Well, I think that the obvious answer is the cost that's associated with litigation if that's where the file ends up when it wasn't done correctly. But the answer for me, I have 3 kids, I have a blended family, I have people in my life that I want to take care of when I go. I don't want them arguing with one another when I'm gone.
Or still to be talking to each other. I mean, if you
want them to be talking to each
like
other.
Siblings just don't talk anymore. I'm sure
Right.
you have
Yeah,
that, right?
we do.
Exactly.
Is it sibling against sibling often?
Often, yes.
Often. That's the worst, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It can be bad.
Mom loved you more. I knew it.
It goes back. That also goes back.
It goes way
decades.
back, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Now, when we touched on it, the blended families, we could do a whole show on this, but we're going to touch on it in the next segment because, as you mentioned, show me a family that doesn't have some kind of blending in there.
Exactly.
Different marriages and children, stepchildren. We're going to find out more about that. From Macquarie LLP today, we have Alyssa Lockhart, partner, and Leah Donaldson, and we'll continue our conversation next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.